Chapter 40. The sudden concern that washed over his grandfather's face was palpable as he finally realized where his grandson had been all night. It was as if a wave of worry crashed over him, causing his voice to tremble as he pleaded, "Please, my dear boy, promise me you won't venture out there again. That area is incredibly dangerous, filled with all sorts of unimaginable things." Adelmo, still perplexed by the events of the previous night, couldn't help but share his confusion with his concerned grandfather. "There was something else that puzzled me," he began, his voice tinged with curiosity. "I stumbled upon a house that bore a striking resemblance to yours. I was convinced it was your place, but when I knocked on the door, a complete stranger answered. The person seemed incredibly nervous, almost as if they were hiding something." His grandfather's eyes widened with a mix of fear and caution as he listened to Adelmo's account. "Ah, my dear boy," he sighed, his voice heavy with worry. "That is precisely why I implore you to stay away from that direction. The people who reside in that house are not what they seem. They are vampires, and they must have mistaken you for someone else, someone who posed a threat to them. It's a treacherous place, my boy, and I fear for your safety." Adelmo's eyes widened in disbelief as he listened to his grandfather's explanation. "Wait, so you're telling me that there are vampires living among us, and we're just supposed to let them be?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "I thought our purpose was to protect people." His grandfather nodded, a calm and understanding expression on his face. "Yes, my dear Adelmo, there are indeed vampires out there. But not all of them are the bloodthirsty monsters you see in movies. Some of them are just like you and me, trying to live their lives as normally as possible." Adelmo's mind raced with questions. "So, the people who live behind you, they're vampires too?" he asked cautiously, trying to wrap his head around the idea. His grandfather smiled warmly. "Yes, they are vampires, but they are also decent people. They have chosen to live peacefully and respect the lives of others. They don't pose a threat to anyone." Curiosity getting the better of him, Adelmo couldn't help but ask, "But what about their need to feed? What do they do when they get that urge?" His grandfather's eyes twinkled with wisdom. "Ah, that's an interesting question, my dear. When they feel the urge to feed, they go to the blood bank. They take only what they need to satisfy their hunger and control their urges. They don't harm anyone in the process." Adelmo's confusion slowly transformed into intrigue. "So, as long as they don't pose a threat to others, we just let them be?" he asked, seeking confirmation. His grandfather nodded, his voice filled with compassion. "Exactly, Adelmo. As long as they live peacefully and don't harm anyone, we respect their choices and let them live their lives. After all, everyone deserves a chance to be understood and accepted, even if they are different from us." Adelmo's grandfather leaned in closer, his eyes glinting with a mixture of caution and excitement. "Let's talk about the mysterious cave right behind us," he began, his voice dropping to a hushed tone. "That cave is a place where secrets are kept, where creatures lurk in the shadows. Sometimes you might stumble upon a werewolf prowling in the darkness. Other times you might witness a whole menagerie of animals seeking refuge from an unknown danger." Adelmo furrowed his brow, his mind racing with questions and doubts. "Could it have been a werewolf that I sensed earlier?" he asked tentatively, his voice barely above a whisper. His grandfather's response was cryptic. "It's difficult to say for sure. Whatever it was, it seems to have left you unharmed. Perhaps it was merely a trick of the mind, a figment of your imagination." Adelmo's heart pounded in his chest as he grappled with the uncertainty of the situation. As the realization sank in that he might have narrowly escaped a dangerous encounter, Adelmo's thoughts swirled with a mix of fear and curiosity. The line between reality and fantasy blurred, leaving him unsettled and on edge. He turned to his grandfather, a plea in his eyes. "Do you have anything for this pounding headache?" he asked, his voice tinged with a hint of desperation. The events of the day had taken a toll on him, both physically and mentally, and he longed for some relief from the mounting tension. In response to Adelmo's plea for pain relievers, his grandfather's face softened with concern. "Yes, of course, let me fetch some for you," he replied, his voice filled with compassion. With a sense of urgency, he swiftly made his way to the bathroom, where he knew he kept a stash of pain relievers. He carefully selected the appropriate medication, ensuring it would bring relief to Adelmo's throbbing head. Moments later, his grandfather returned, holding out the pain relievers to Adelmo. The young man gratefully accepted them, his eyes reflecting both gratitude and discomfort. "Thank you, Grandpa," Adelmo murmured, his voice laced with appreciation. Sensing his grandson's need for rest, his grandfather gently advised, "You should lie down until the pain subsides, but don't take too long. Remember, we have important plans for today." Adelmo nodded, acknowledging his grandfather's words. "I understand," he replied, his voice tinged with a hint of frustration. "I'll get to those places we discussed last night as soon as I can. Right now, my head is pounding." His grandfather's eyes softened with understanding, and he placed a comforting hand on Adelmo's shoulder. "Take your time, my boy," he reassured. "Your health comes first. Once you're feeling better, we'll tackle those tasks together, just like we planned." With a grateful smile, Adelmo settled down, knowing that his grandfather's unwavering support would guide him through the pain and towards their shared goals. Adelmo made his way up to his room, feeling a mix of exhaustion and restlessness. As he entered his room, he decided to change into something more comfortable, hoping it would help him relax. He slipped into a cozy pair of pajamas and then laid down on his soft bed, the weight of the day's events weighing heavily on his mind. Thoughts and worries started flooding his thoughts, making it difficult for him to find peace and drift off into a deep sleep. Time seemed to pass by in a blur as Adelmo struggled to find solace in slumber. Despite his best efforts, sleep eluded him, leaving him tossing and turning in frustration. Just as he was about to give up and accept his sleepless fate, a sudden jolt ran through his body, causing him to abruptly wake up. His heart raced, and he found himself panting heavily, as if he had just experienced a frightful nightmare. Confused and disoriented, he glanced at the clock and realized that only an hour had passed since he had laid down. Determined not to let the lost hour dampen his spirits, Adelmo quickly got out of bed and changed into his regular clothes. He knew he had wasted precious time, but he couldn't dwell on it for too long. There was still research to be done, and he couldn't afford to waste any more of his day. With a renewed sense of urgency, he hurried downstairs, hoping to make up for the lost time. As he descended the stairs, he spotted his grandfather sitting in his favorite chair in the living room. His grandfather's concerned gaze met his, and he couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort knowing that someone cared about his well-being. His grandfather asked him if his head felt better, and Adelmo nodded, grateful for the concern and support.